I'm very honored to have Eddie van Hemelrijk in our class. He's a lecturer, he's a colleague lecturer at the Karel de Grote Hogeschool in Antwerp. And he's also founder of Maror, and he organizes within that company workshops about sustainability, intercultural management, and is, let's say, very skilled in rethinking economics. I will give the word to Eddie. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you all. It's an honor and a pleasure that I'm invited by Bert to talk to you here this afternoon. You will hear it's really my passion I will talk about. So I think I'm limited to an hour and a half or something. I also would like to have some questions and some interaction. So feel free to use the public chat box. I can see it here, so that's going to be easy. And maybe before we really start, I would like to know, are you familiar with the term VUCA? V-U-C-A, VUCA. And if you do, can you give me the abbreviation? What does it stand for? So what is VUCA? So put it in the chat box before I really start talking about volatile. Yes, so volatility, the U stands for uncertainty, and the C stands for, so we have volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and then we have still the last A, which stands for ambiguity. Yeah. So very good. So this is a word that you all should know and remember, because that's, I think, really typical for our current era in which we live. It's very difficult to predict the future. It always has been, but I think now people start to realize it's really the case. You can make the best business plan you want, and then Corona comes around the corner, and then everything stops. It's changing a lot. There's a lot of volatility, uncertainty. It's complex. I'm going to talk about a few things, but they're all interconnected. And if you change one thing on the left, it has a huge impact, like the butterfly effect. And ambiguity, it's also clear what it means. So we live in this kind of world where you students are learning a lot of stuff, but you don't know how you're going to be able to apply it, whether it's going to be still useful or not. A lot of professions not existing yet that will exist in 5 years. So it's really, for me, a very challenging period in humans' history. Now, what we're going to do this afternoon is talk about mainly the economy, because it's at the core of our lives, our core of our thinking. And for me, COVID-19 or Corona has been another trigger. There are more that actually invites us to think about how would we prefer to have our economy organized. And maybe, if you go even deeper, how would you like our life to be organized? And for that, and now let's see if I can make it work, because in the meantime, this changed into this one. So what I made, and okay, you see all four at the same time. I wanted to click on it. So I'm going to share you my personal story, because I think it's a bit a metaphor, not a metaphor, but what is happening in society also happened to me over the last 30 years. And that will become clear in when I present it. The second part will be, okay, what's on the economic impact of what we're going through globally with the pandemic? The third part will be about, I truly believe that we need to make a systemic shift. So the whole system, our education, our politics, our economy, is actually, it's necessary to think about another way of organizing it. And then there will be Q&A, but feel free during the first three parts, if you have certain questions, to ask them as well. Now, I probably have the age of your parents, approximately. I'm 55. I graduated a long time ago, before you were born. Most of you were born in 1987 at the university in Antwerp, and which is a beautiful university. And I was trained as a neoliberal economist. So I studied applied economics, and I show 3 different books, which at that time in the 80s were quite popular and also representative for what was important in that decade. Guy Sormand, he published a book, The Minimum State. So it was the time of Reagan, Thatcher, like no influence of government, please. Let businesses do their thing. Let's give a lot of liberty, neoliberalism, give a lot of liberty to business and the economy, and then it will all be okay. I like books of, and perhaps some of you know that writer, author Sulitzer, originally in French, but has been translated. Le Roi Vert, it's about a guy who survives the Holocaust and who builds an empire. Another book of him is Money, Cash, Fortune. Actually, there are three different, it's a trilogy. And I was like an ambitious young business student who wanted to conquer the world, build an empire, sell stuff, become rich, make a lot of money. I guess maybe some of you still you've chosen these studies also for that reason. Now, I was lucky because I could start working for an international company, Johnson & Johnson, actually initially Janssen, which is a pharmaceutical company belonging to the J&J group. And I was asked to travel a lot, to go abroad, to go to China, to go to Russia, because in the 80s, the currencies in Russia and China, normally I ask the students, okay, what's the currency in China? So what's the currency in China? I'm going to ask it here anyway. So what's the currency in China? Yeah, the yuan. Okay, very good. Not the yen. A lot of students answered the yen is Japan. And then in Russia, okay, we have Russians. So what's the currency in Russia? Rubles. Okay. So in the 80s, these currencies were not convertible. So if J&J wanted to sell their medicines in China or Russia, they were paid in local currency. It was not convertible. So what we needed to do is we needed to exchange it for other goods, barter trade. So as a early my 20s graduated business students, I was asked to travel to Russia and to China and to see with what kind of products we could exchange our medicines, which was quite interesting to do because I was offered tea from Georgia. I was offered marble. I was offered shoes from Cuba when we were doing business with Cuba. I was offered chemicals. And I needed to find for products for a price who was willing to buy it and then exchange it with our medicines. It was fantastic. The basic form of trade, of economics. I have something that you may be interested in. What can you offer me in return? And bypassing money. So it was quite challenging to do. In China, the currency is called renminbi, which means the currency of the people in Mandarin. And yuan is the official title, which is used in international trade. So yuan is the official name. So I went quite often to China and to Russia. I did that a couple of years, and then I was asked to switch to a corporate function and trying to bring all the J&J companies working together in Europe, which was challenging because I had to work with the English, the French, the Germans, and making them buy together stuff. What's the advantage of corporate purchasing? It's a question for you. If you have to, we were working with different travel agencies, for example, and we decided to go to one and to have all our travels from 90 different companies buying from the same travel agency. So what do you get if you bundle your purchases? Control, discounts. How is it called in economic terms? What do you get if you have, if you can buy like comparative advantage? Yeah, economies of scale, and of course you have more negotiation power. It was fun to do, and it was really my dream. Going into business, selling stuff, getting education too, because I graduated with a master's degree. But thanks to J&J, they offered me the possibility to do an MBA, which is also the dream, the wet dream of students having a master's degree in economics. Okay, let's do an MBA. So I followed an MBA at the Flanders Business School combined with the Kellogg School of Management in Chicago. You see the difference on the left. You see the more old traditional building in Antwerp, and on the right, the much more modern in Chicago. For me, interesting part was that I met engineers and doctors and lawyers that also wanted to learn something about economics. So I get inspired by different views. And it was very international as well. So it was still part of, okay, I want to be a global business manager and make money and make a career. Now, what you see now is quite different. I don't know how big you see it. So you can look at me. I weighed at least 15 kilos less than I weigh today. After 7 years of working for J&J, I started to realize, also because the CEO of the Belgian multinational Janssen died at a very young age because of cancer, I started to realize, is this it? Okay, I am a high potential, I'm well paid, I travel a lot, but isn't there more in life than just work? And I met my wife, and we were saying, okay, what if we take a break, kind of sabbatical? And we're talking about 94, which was I mean, now world trips and sabbaticals are quite common amongst youngsters, but at that time it wasn't the case. So I asked my employee, look, I want to take a year off or maybe 6 months. And the answer was, okay, are you going to go for a PhD or something? I said, no, I'm going to marry my wife and we want to go on a honeymoon, but on extended honeymoon. They said I was crazy. Also, my family and friends were saying, why are you quit? And because actually they said no. J&J said, no, we can't give it to you, because if we give it to you, there are 3,000 people working in the offices here in Belgium. Maybe they all want to take a sabbatical for backpacking. No, we can't do that. So I quit. I quit my job at J&J. I jumped into the unknown, leaving a perhaps very promising future behind me for traveling in Southeast Asia. So during 6 months, actually I wanted to go a year. My wife wanted to go 6 months. Guys amongst the listeners, so it was 6 months. She won the negotiations. So we went for 6 months and really backpacked through Vietnam, Thailand, Nepal. It was really an amazing event. But of course, coming back, I had no job. And being 28 at the time, I was like, okay, maybe it's time to start a family. I have a wife now, so I need a job. So I found a job. I found a job with a Belgian paper mill that was looking for somebody to start exports of their paper. Actually, it was backing paper for labels. So if you get a label, you tear off the label, the paper that you throw away, a bit transparent, is the paper we were making. And actually, there were not so many places in the world where this paper was made. It was made in Scandinavia, 2 companies, a Swedish and a Finnish company, and ourselves in Belgium. And they asked me if I wanted to become their export manager for Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, and Asia. So yeah, it was nice. It was again traveling. So I started traveling, and here you see me in China. I was wearing a red shirt, hoping that it would culturally impact the business. I was interviewed by the Chinese TV. What is a Belgian guy doing here for a company selling stuff to paper here in China? It was interesting again. I did it for 3.5 years. But then the paper mill was having difficulties because it was a very old paper mill. We had 3 paper machines, one of 1898, one of 1900, and one of 1902. And we were competing against fast modern machinery in Scandinavian countries. Buying a new paper machine was very expensive. It was 3 times the price of our annual turnover. So we were not able to invest in new machinery. I knew that we were making losses because these competitors in Scandinavia were much more better cost position than we had. So I quit, although it hurt, because I really liked working for them. And actually, a year and a half after that, I quit the company. They were bought by a competitor, and actually they closed the factory and they just took over the customers, which was sad because 250 people lost their jobs. So my last real job, between brackets, is a company that the Belgians certainly will know. I joined in the end of the 90s Kipling, which is at the time was a Belgian fashion brand in bags, mostly handbags, but also for school. Certainly no for school. I hope some of you still have some Kiplings. Are there people having Kipling bags? Let's quickly check. So typical about, okay, so some of you do. Huh? So it started, unfortunately, it's no longer Belgian. So it was a very luxurious period for me because I ended as being the vice president of the company in charge of international sales. So I was 4 months a year abroad, visiting the partners in Brazil, in Japan, in South Africa, in Australia. You see a picture here where the at the time Princess and Prince of Belgium were organizing in Thailand a huge festivity, and so we were offering all the guests Kipling bags. In the meantime, she's our queen and he's our king. So it was very luxurious way of life, but still. And that brings me to why I'm going to talk about sustainability. On these trips, I saw what was happening in the world. I saw a lot of inequality. When I was in Brazil, I visited the favelas, and I saw the richness of my partner, Kipling, in Brazil, providing bags at very high prices to the well-off people in the country, and I didn't like that so much. I also saw what was happening in for example, the Philippines or Malaysia or Borneo when I was flying from one place to another. I saw how the jungle that was present in these countries was replaced by palm tree plantations, killing all wildlife. I saw that also in Argentina. So I was starting to think, I'm selling bags. Yeah, it's nice. If you have a Kipling bag, you belong. It gives you happiness, but still, how much added value for society is that? So I said, I need to do something else. And although I was very happy and fortunate and was living a life that many people would dream of, I decided to stop my international career. Other aspect was also I had 2 kids, and my youngest, when I came back from business trip, asked me who I was. She didn't recognize her father because I was so much abroad, which I also started wondering, so why do I have kids if they don't even recognize their father because I'm so often abroad? So in 2002, which for me was a turning point in my career, and it's also linked to society, because in the 80s, the 90s, companies started to realize it's not only about profits and finance, it's also about our environmental impact we have with our activities. It's also about the social impact we have for our activities. It's about the sweatshops of Nike, whether they are in Bangladesh or in Vietnam, or it's about indeed the pollution we create by mining. So it was like, I don't know, it was a midlife crisis or something. It's like, it's linked with society. Companies seeing that what they do had a huge impact on the environment and also on social issues. So in 2002, I quit working for Kipling and I started on a PhD. Okay, maybe perhaps I wanted to do something in sustainability. And when I knocked on doors of companies, they said, well, but you're an economist. What can we do with you? Huh? You have no relevant background. Okay, you have management experience and you have marketing experience, but what do you know about sustainability? So I said, okay, I'll write a PhD about it. So I started first in Belgium, but they sent me to the Netherlands because in the Netherlands they were much more advanced. So I started writing on a PhD on intercultural issues related to sustainability. How do people perceive sustainability, whether they are based in Argentina or they're in China or in Belgium? But of course, I needed income. So I contacted a few business schools, and KDG said, okay, we can use somebody with some marketing experience. So I started teaching marketing, but quickly environmental economics and also sustainability. And I started my own company, which is still around. It's called Maror NV, in order to help companies focus much more also on other issues than only making profit. So from where initially I started from being a very neoliberal economist, which was normal in the 70s and the 80s, I started to see that other aspects are important. I became much more an environmental economist, and I also started to recognize the necessity of governments, the use of governments. And now if you look at Corona, I mean, companies are asking for support from the government to help them through these difficult times. We ask for support of the government because we need healthcare. So I think there has been a real switch from where in the 70s, 80s, it was all about business. Now people start to realize, well, there is an added value of a government given it's properly run and so on and so forth. So that's actually in a nutshell. Okay, I'm going to add 3 more slides. I recommend you also, if you like traveling, go traveling. In 2006, I went again on the second sabbatical, this time with my family for 13 months. We traveled throughout the world, actually. So what you see for the Flemish-speaking people, the wereldrond.org means aroundtheworld.org, but we don't have the English site anymore. So when we did our first trip in 94, we met a couple with kids, and my wife said, oh, you can do this kind of world trips with kids too. One day when we have kids, I want to do the same. So somewhere 2004, I think my wife said when I came out of the shower, like, hey, we have 2 kids. When are we going this world trip? And so we started thinking, okay, when can we do it? How can we organize it? So, but we didn't want to just travel around. We wanted to make it useful. And given I was much more into sustainability and environmental issues, we contacted WWF, I hope you all know, an NGO, and told them, look, we want to travel with our kids around the globe and we want to visit your projects. Is that possible? Can we do something together? And it took some conversations with the marketing people of WWF, and they said, yeah, maybe we can attract new members if we follow your kids on this trip. So they organized a quiz in Flemish and in French on their website. And each month there was a question about our kids being in Argentina, visiting a project of WWF. So it was, and it helped us because during our trip we could meet, and let's perhaps show the next slide. Don't know if you can. So this is, so we've done underwater world projects in the Philippines, for example, and in Indonesia. We did everything which was related to glaciers and the impact of the melting water because of climate change in Nepal. We visited projects from them in the north of Argentina, border with Brazil, on jungle. It really matters. And for me, it was also interesting to see that WWF is not only protecting wildlife, but is also trying to find something to replace. Sometimes, for example, in the Philippines and in Indonesia, the fishermen were using dynamite to kill fish, which of course is not very sustainable. But if you ask them to stop using dynamite for fishing purposes, they have less fish, so they can't sell that much anymore, or they can't get an income anymore. So they need to have a replacement. So what WWF did in Indonesia, for example, is learning them to use seaweed to make sweets. So they were still using the underwater world, but using products offered by the underwater world to turn it into sweets, actually very natural and healthy sweets, to sell to people and taking AdSense once more. So I was happily surprised to see that WWF is also taking into account the social aspect. Lately, since 2007, apart from me teaching, apart from me working for companies, I was a member of the University for the Common Good for about 10 years. We'll talk about commons. I don't know if you understand the concept of commons. So things that should be protected because they belong to everyone, whether it's land, whether it's water, whether it's maybe even internet. There's all discussion like we should offer free internet to all. So then it becomes a common. There should be a minimum available for everybody all the time. So I was member of that University for the Common Good in Belgium, and I started my own, together with my wife, NGO. It's called Imagine Life. We organize all kinds of workshops about dreams. How can you dream a different society, and what can you do in order to achieve it? I'm just clicking on the chat because I don't see any chats anymore, although there is. Oh, I need to go to the public chat. Okay. So I need to learn this system. So that's a bit about me and what I'm doing. And I think it's important because what happened to me happened to a lot of people in our society. Also your parents. Your parents started doing jobs without realizing that it had an impact on the environment, without realizing that it may have an impact on what's happening in less developed countries and so on. And with Imagine Life, we want to change the narrative. The narrative for me has to do with the fact that, let's say in the Middle Ages, religion, and in still quite a few countries, religion is very important, but it was replaced by the scientific narrative. The Renaissance, science, you had to be able to prove stuff. It then was replaced by the economic narrative. From the 1950s onwards, the economy became really the core. We're going to talk about buying stuff, about even if the World Trade Center was bombed, the American president saying as first thing, okay, please go buy stuff. We need to continue buying. So from the God, Allah, Jehovah, and so on, science, the economy became the core. And I think it's perhaps time for a new narrative. I'm checking the chat site. I don't know when you asked the question, Christiana. Can you repeat, please, the question? I think we passed that for some time already. So today, the early decades of the 21st century, the master story in how we organize our lives is actually the economy. It starts with your choice of studies. It starts of your choice of finding a job. It's about getting money, being able to buy stuff. So how we think, feel, and act, the economy is really at the core of our lives. And the way it's being taught to people at universities, MBA programs, is actually today, unfortunately, still quite often what I learned in the 80s and the 90s. Not completely, and I'm sure that Bert van Thilborgh, your professor, is bringing in other information as well. But unfortunately, a lot of universities and business schools still teach the neoliberal approach, which is about profit maximization, growth, while in the meantime, we started to realize, look, we live on a finite planet. We have finite resources. Maybe we should start organizing our economy differently. Maybe we need other than neoliberal programs to look at the economy. And there are a lot of alternatives. There are a lot of other ways, like me calling myself an environmental economist, but you have a feminine economy, you have Austrian economy. So there is a variety of ways of teaching economics and understanding economics. And rethinking economics, what you see now on the slide, started in the UK, in the meantime, almost 10 years ago, by professors and students saying, look, we should change our programs. It's not normal that when somebody at the age of 18, 19 starts university studying economics, if we test him or her at that moment in how cooperative they are very cooperative. 4 years later or 5 years later, when they graduate, they're a lot more competitive. They don't want to share anymore. It's about my share has to be the biggest and I have to be able to grow my share. So in our education, our economic education, we teach them to become very competitive. Actually, when I was working for Kipling as a vice president, we were purchased by a Swiss investment group, and I got a new CEO, and he came from Philip Morris, so tobacco company, but also food. And so he used to be the CEO of Philip Morris, and he joined then Kipling, and he became my boss. And he told me, Eddie, the only thing which is important is kill your competitor. I don't care about the rest. Make sure that you kill the other fashion producers. And it was like, no, I mean, if we teach this kind of stuff to youngsters, of course our world is gonna stay competitive. And I'm not against competitive, but killing people in order to make more profit, that's not the way to go. So rethinking economics is a movement. It's a global movement in the meantime. And I started rethinking economics, Belgium or Antwerp, not Belgium, a year ago. And we organize sessions where we try to influence professors, teachers, and students to ask for learn us also something else than price competition and competitive. Okay, I'm not against competitive advantage, but the fact that eternal growth is possible. So we had a very nice session in April of this year where we had 5 people talking about what kind of economists do the world need. We had Michelle Holliday coming, and we have now Kees Klomp. I see this is still the old slide. I think I have a newer one in the thing that I've sent. Kees Klomp is a Dutch economist. He's teaching purpose economy, and he will speak, and it's in English in December. It's next week, so you're all invited. It's a free online session on Wednesday evening from 8 till 10 maximum, and he will explain how our economy should become much more a purpose-driven economy. We had Michelle Holliday talking about thriving society. So these are things for me that really matter, that are important. Brent, I will share the information afterwards with your professor so that you can follow. So that's the first part. It's actually my life story till today and how it's reflected in society, and also how society is changing its way of looking at it. And I was very happy that last year, for example, we had these demonstrations of Greta Thunberg, and then also in Belgium and in other countries, other people took that role to make people aware that we have to be careful. We're going towards another age of mass extinction. Maybe our own human civilization is at risk if we don't change the way we're doing stuff. So let me bring you into the... Do you have any questions about the first part? A bit of background information, what happened, the impact, things that are important. Any questions regarding that first part or not? And I'm going perhaps a bit fast, but I have a lot to talk about. Okay, everything clear. Okay, now let's move to the second part. Now, and I used this presentation. I was teaching to the Stirling University in Scotland last week. They asked me specifically the question. So, what do you think, as an economist, the impact of Corona on the economy? So yeah, there will always be people for different economic disciplines. I think we should teach you different economic disciplines, and it's up to you to choose whatever you like most, or maybe a combination. You make a kind of cocktail out of it. But we should not teach you only one, because it's not a scientific. It's not science. It's about human behavior, and you can look at it from different points of views. So let's talk about the impact of Corona on our economy. And the slides. I hope you can see that large on your screen, because for me it's pretty small at the moment. This is an overview, which actually Bert van Thilborgh will recognize, because we've seen it being presented to us not so long ago. But I made this version myself in an Excel sheet. It's not too complicated. And if we look at today, if we ask people how is the economy doing, people always go to GDP. Gross domestic product. They want to know, okay, how much do the people in a country produce in a year? That seems to matter. Huh? That's what we measure, so it must be important. And if you look at GDP growth, you see that Corona has the biggest negative impact. So the forecasts are, we're not going to grow this year. We're going to globally diminish a lot. So it's dramatic. It's like, it's a nightmare. Of course, in our current economic system, it's a nightmare, because if we produce less, we have less jobs available. If we have less jobs available, we have more unemployment. So our governments need to find money to pay the unemployment, and people need jobs in order to find satisfaction and purpose. So from that point of view, it's a nightmare. It's going to be even bigger than the impact of the Second World War. It's going to be bigger than the what happened in the economic depression of the 30s. And so you see the financial 2008 crisis with a -2% on GDP, but now the predictions are -10, -12%. So everybody's like, oh my God, that's really bad. I'm going to argue that from a neoliberal perspective and economic growth perspective, it's bad, but maybe it's a trigger to say, hey, we're doing stuff that is perhaps not okay. Let's do it a bit differently. And maybe we can also use other measures. Now, why is GDP for us so important? And I really like Victor Leboeuf's statement, what you see here. In the 50s, he wrote an article saying, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption a way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. So it's like a religion. Our consumption/production society, because actually it's a production society, we need to keep our factories working. So it's a religion. We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever accelerating rate. We ask engineers to construct our products in such a way that they break down, so that you have to buy new stuff. Not too quickly, because then you don't trust the brand anymore, but not too long, because then you make less money. That's called planned obsolescence. And then you have perceived obsolescence, which is fashion related. Like with Kipling, we were initially making 1 line a year, then 2 lines a year, then 4 lines a year. And now in the fashion industry, it's weekly or on demand. And we change colors a lot, so that people feel awkward if they still wear red, because the color now is blue. So it's all, and of course, after the Second World War, we needed to rebuild the economy. But once it was rebuilt, we needed to find ways of having people buy stuff. So they organized it. Isn't it stupid? Well, it's understandable, but it has a huge impact on our environmental systems, because we're using our mineral resources at an accelerating rate, and we're running out of them. We're polluting at waste and so on and so forth. For me, that's the old narrative. Well, old, it's probably still the current narrative. It's still the current narrative. Now the discussions we have about opening stores, we should open our stores again. Why? Everybody knows that it's a risk, because there will be more contamination. Yeah, but if we keep them longer closed, people will lose their jobs. The economy will not grow. We will not be able to pay back our debts. So we're trapped. We're trapped in this narrative, and we need to get out of it. Amina is saying minus 30%, so negative growth of the GDP worldwide. I'm not sure if it's that high, but maybe. Yeah. Okay, so and even, I mean, did you have sustainability? Did you already have sustainability somewhere in your courses? Just checking. Yeah, of course. Of course, you know then the Sustainable Development Goals, don't you? You've seen them. The SDGs. Everybody's saying, wow, we have the SDGs. United Nations, you know, they replaced the Millennium Goals. So from 2000 to 2015, we had the Millennial Goals. And of course, we didn't reach the Millennial Goals. The world didn't manage to. We improved a bit, but not enough. So when the Millennium Goals were not reached in 2015, and the deadline, the SMART objective, so it was 2015 was the deadline, was not reached, they said, okay, we need to come up with something else. So they came up with the Sustainable Development Goals, and you probably had to learn them for classes or so. So 16 goals, and the 17th is partnership. I'm not against SDGs, but even in the SDGs, there is still goal 8, economic growth. Why? Because we need people to buy stuff so that we can produce stuff, that we can create jobs, and so on and so forth. But it's not so good. If we keep on growing, yeah, or we need to do it in a different way. Of course, there's a lot of criticism on goal number 8, and I'm also criticizing goal number 8 in SDGs. Now, if GDP is not a good measurement because it leads us to dramatic expansion and overuse of our resources, whether minerals or fish or whatever, so what are better alternatives to measure if we're moving forward in the right direction? You probably have heard, I think, of the Gross National Happiness Index. It started in Bhutan. We have somebody from Nepal here in the audience, I saw. So Bhutan is also a mountain state in the Himalayas, and each year, do we have any? Perhaps we have somebody from Bhutan. Vishnu, you're from Nepal, yeah? I think. So every year, the people living in Bhutan, the citizens of Bhutan, get a questionnaire to fill in. How satisfied are they with their education that is being offered to them? The social welfare that is being offered to them? The quality of the hospitals? And the government is being measured on how that score is, and if the score gets better. They may also look at GDP, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is we as representatives, being your government, are we doing a good job? Do we make it possible for you to have a good life? So, and I know that the National Happiness Index, also some French leaders in the past, British leaders in the past, were thinking, or European leaders, maybe we should do something with it. Maybe we should measure ourselves also using something else. I think I have one other example, the Happy Planet Index, which you may have seen as well, where you measure a combination of things. It's based on education, it's on lifelong expectancy, and so on. And then you see the colors where the score is higher, where the score is lower, linked with colors. You can look at it later on. So instead of measuring production, GDP, what about if we start to measure happiness? Or another one, when you start measuring well-being. I'm a big fan of what is happening in Scotland, Iceland, New Zealand. These countries joined the economy of well-being. And when you get the presentation, you can click on it and then you go to websites. You can also listen to a presentation of Sindar, which you see here. We need to address the societal well-being of our nation, not just the economic well-being. So you see the change in narrative. And for me, New Zealand is certainly a good example. They also have Zip Corona. Okay, they are an island. They were capable of closing down their borders much easier than Belgium can. But so, and maybe coincidence, but the prime ministers of these countries are all women. When I say that, some of my friends say, oh, what, doesn't matter, no? Whether it's a man or a woman? No, but it is, or they are women governing these countries. So there is really a trend change, a shift, a paradigm shift, a systemic shift, where people start to realize it's not all about the economy, or the economy should perhaps support our society within the planetary boundaries we have. So where I was raised in the 80s, like, forget the government, business will do it all, I started to realize business can do a lot. And of course, business did a lot of good job. I think the general increase of welfare was thanks to companies and business operations. But we have to also watch a bit. If businesses are driven by maximization of profits, externalizing environmental costs, externalizing social impact, we need perhaps governments to protect us against what they do. And maybe they should really be for the people, by the people. So the function, the role of government, certainly also now in Corona, we notice they can act and protect and perhaps stimulate in a good way. Okay, I'm just checking the chat. How would you measure happiness? I've given 2 examples, self-reports. Yeah, ask the people, like you can ask in your university how sad, they should ask you how satisfied are you with the courses you get, with the quality of the teachers, with the tasks you get, the development, the support you get, and so on and so forth. You cannot do that for a country as well, or for the globe, if we do it on a global level. Okay. This is a slide which, for me, captures it all. Maybe you know it. Have you seen the combination of ecological footprint and the Human Development Index? Is that something that you're familiar with, that you know already? Okay. So Sophie says yes. Yeah. So you know. So for me, and normally I use my cursor, but I can't. I don't think if I use my cursor you can see it. So on the vertical axis you have the ecological footprint. So measuring how many planets we need to support our population. The fair Earth share is about 2 hectares. So each of us is entitled for having 2 hectares to produce and to waste. If you look at Belgium, for example, we use 8 hectares. So if each citizen on this planet would live like a Belgian, we would need 4 planets. So 8 hectares, we are only entitled to 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So you need 4 planets if everybody would live like a Belgian, meaning consuming, producing, wasting the electricity we need, the food, the cars, the laptops, and name it. So this is, of course, too high. This is not sustainable. We need to lower the ecological footprint of human society on our planet. So we need to go down. On the horizontal axis, you find the Human Development Index, which is about literacy, life expectancy, and that needs to go up. We need to go above 0.8. Of course, all the wealthy nations, we're up here. You can't see my cursor. You're up right corner. But let's say the less developed countries, quite often, they have a very low ecological footprint, which is good. But of course, they also have a very low Human Development Index, which is bad. So we need to move up these countries to a higher Human Development Index, and we need to lower the more wealthy countries to a lower ecological footprint. And then you should be in the right box, so higher than 0.8 and lower than 2. And then you have something that I guess you're all familiar with as well. If not, then it's high time. Then we are what actually the donut economics represent. Did you learn about the donut economics? Can you answer me in the chat, please? Did you see that, the donut economics? No. Max says yes, so he followed another course. Paula also said yes. So Kate Hayworth started 3 years ago by writing a book and is now on a crusade to promote her book and her ideas globally. And actually, the city of Brussels is going to implement the donut economics, like the city of Rotterdam is doing the same. So you can do it on a city level or on a global level. For me, this is a very nice representation of what the economy should do. And it's the same as the Human Development Index and the ecological footprint. You see a donut and you see a hole in the middle. It's really a pity I can't point it. But yeah. So in the middle, you see this is shortage. And there is a social ceiling in the middle. So there is poverty, inequality, gender inequality. So this is all what we don't have. We need to improve it. We need to put it on a higher level. So we need to end up on the donut, not in the middle in the hole. So we need this shortcoming. We should work on it. These are the social aspects. If you look outside the donut, this is overshoot. This is, for example, the impact we have on climate change, on ozone layer depletion, land depletion. So these are the which called the environmental boundaries of our planet. So the life support functions that are threatened, we should not exceed them. With our 7.8 billion people, or perhaps 9 billion by 2050, and then people think it might stabilize, we should be able to live with our 9 billion people on the donut. So we should lift everything which is social inequality or things poverty, and we should make sure we are not exceeding the boundaries of our planet. For me, the best example is using the Earth as a spaceship. Imagine the Earth is a spaceship, and actually it is a spaceship. You can only, if I send you now in space and I give you a couple of hours to prepare, you may go and buy food and drinks. You're in a spaceship into the atmosphere, into the space. After a while, you run out of resources, and then you start eating the others in order to stay alive. We may have to be careful that we're not doing the same on our planet. If we overuse the things that are generated by the Earth itself, if we're using more than it can regenerate, we're going to use our reserves. And in the end, if our reserves are gone, we will not be able to survive anymore. So we have to live with what is technically possible with the resources we have on this planet. So that's in a nutshell. There are a lot of TED Talks available of Kate explaining it. If you like the concept, go and have a look. It's really well explained. What she doesn't do in the book is explain how to get there. She explains what she would like to achieve, but it's not very clear how to get there then. But you can use it as a kind of parameters of how you should move. So I like these two concepts. This one, perhaps the most attractive one, because it's pretty easy to understand. Any questions regarding the Human Development Index, ecological footprint, the donut economics, or the donut you see here? Or is it clear so far?
Yeah.
Okay. And in the meantime, let it sink. And if you have questions, you can also ask them afterwards. I hope that what I've been explaining to you is not only clear, but also understood in the larger context of you youngsters building a new world. What kind of world would you like to live in? What is important for you? And how can you make it happen with our 7.8 billion people? And not only you, but your kids. I have kids. I hope to have grandkids one day. I want to have them have a good life as well, with access to drinking water, with access to clean air, and so on. So we need to get there. Second part, and that is more for those who like finance or money, and it's also Corona linked. Our governments already had a pretty huge debt, and now Corona is there, and our government is actually not our government. The European Central Bank is making new money, and our for example, in Belgium, a lot of people that got unemployed now, they get additional money from the government. It needs to come from somewhere. I'm just going to check as I see. What use is there if only the West does it? Giton, that's a good question. It's certainly not only the West. I think that, for example, China is advancing a lot more and faster now than we in Europe, to give you one example, and also African countries like Ethiopia and so on and so forth. And there are different things that needs to be done. If your question is, can they? Okay, we'll have this question perhaps at the end again. So remind me if I didn't answer it. So if we talk about debt, so everything which is finance, and I think you probably have finance courses as well. You see a ballooning debt. You see a huge debt, and I'm gonna use another screen here because for me it's too small and I don't know all the numbers by heart. So, and I have a bigger screen here so that I can see the bigger screen. you see as a part of GDP. This is from 1970 to 2019. Basically, it's from the IMF. You see that all the total, whether it's government or private, debt is increasing a lot. So we have, so when it says 160%, it means that you have to produce a year and a half in order to repay your debt. You don't do anything else but repaying your debt. And this is before the start of Corona. So before the start of Corona, and of course you see the 2008 increase, the financial crisis in 2008. What happened is a lot of banks were bailed out by the government. In the US, in Belgium, in France. So bailing out banks paid with what? With tax money, with you, or your parents' tax money. And of course, the governments, in order to make banks, allow banks to continue living, they took the debt on their part. So the debts went up. The only country actually that really acted, I think, properly was Iceland. The banks went broke and the bankers were put in jail. That was a warning, like, don't mess with our money. If you mess with our money, you end up in jail. In some countries, unfortunately also in Belgium, these bankers got even bonuses from their shareholders, which I think is not correct. But anyway, so if you continue and you see the next slide, then you see the overview. I'm gonna make mine a bit bigger. This is, and it includes now, last year with impact of Corona, we have 260 trillion, okay, nobody understands that number, I think, of dollars of debt globally. We go up to 330% of GDP weighted. So it's huge. I think nobody will ever be able to pay, well, the world will not be able to pay back debt. A lot of people now in Belgium and other countries are asking, yeah, but all that money we get from our governments now, it must come from somewhere. We will be taxed someday to pay back the money they give us now. In our old system, yes. And why is that? And that brings me to the crux of the issue, is the creation, okay, maybe another example is the European Central Bank launched a 750 billion euro dollar, not euro dollar, 750 billion euro program in order to fight the pandemic. The details you can find if you go to the articles about it, because they give this money to other banks and so on, and it comes to finally to us, or should come to us. So it increases the debt, and that's going to be an issue because it will create inflation and so on and so forth. The point I want to make, so that's the bazooka. You still see the bazooka, but I skipped it. I'm going to explain this one. Is normally the money that is being created by the central bank in Europe or by the Federal Reserve in the US should be used for the real economy. The real economy, meaning your bakery, your butcher, buying and sell products. And what we see is that a lot of this extra created money goes into financial markets, stock markets, financial products, and is disconnected from the real world, being the real economy, which is a threat. I know people who work for the European Central Bank, and they say, what's happening? We don't understand. We put 750 billion euros in the real economy, and it's evaporating. It's not really evaporating. It goes on the stock market, but the stock market is air. In a way, it's air. When a company goes to the stock market because it needs money, then it gets money. But once the stock is traded, it's between two people. It's no longer the company behind it. So it goes up or it goes down. Of course, if the company still owns shares of itself, then the value goes up and down as well. But so the issue that I want to make here is that we create a lot of money, but it goes into the financial markets, and it's speculation, it's gambling to some extent, and it's not helping the real economy. And what needs to, I mean, we should give this money to people directly. They've been thinking about it, even in the US, they were thinking about, what if we give everybody $1,000 a person on their bank account so they can use it to pay their rent, to buy food, to buy medicines? I think that would be really good. Europe has been thinking about it too. Should we perhaps distribute money directly to people? And in Belgium, it's happening. If you're working in the event sector, for example, and you lost your job or the company's done, then you can apply for a kind of subsidy, or not subsidy, you get money paid by the government. So that's directly going into the real economy. Now, it sounds a bit I mean, bad. I mean, our GDP is negative. We are creating additional debt. How we're going to pay back? I want to make a short side note to be a bit more optimistic. And I'm watching the time. I still have half an hour max. Huh?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I may speed up a bit. So I think what we realized on the environmental side, for example, is that due to Corona, we stopped producing, we stopped polluting. And people in India saw for the first time the Himalayas, because the last 30 years it was all smog. Nobody could see it from where they were living. In Venice, for example, the water became very clear. Some people said there were dolphins, but that seems to be a hoax, not true. So but it really had an impact on the environment. It's the first time, and I think I have a slide about that, the overshoot day, it's the moment in the year where we have used everything that the earth produces, is delayed because we have less pollution. Huh? So what CO2 emissions, I mean, Greta has been pleading for it with all our Marses and going to the United Nations, but Corona actually helped, not enough and not that much, because it's just delaying of CO2 emissions. But it made us realize, and that's perhaps more important, that maybe you can do with less. The rat race stopped. Check with your parents. Quite often, or some of the parents will say, we had more time. I'm still, I mean, I regret all the people that die because of Corona and people losing their jobs. But we were living in a time where there is a rat race, where burnout increases, where depressions is increasing. So, and this, people start to realize what's really valuable in life. What do we need? What kind of stuff do we need? And what is really valuable is connection. And I know we're not allowed now to be connected with people, which is for me dramatic and for many people. So, but people start to realize, do we want to live that life where we wake up at 6 in the morning, have no breakfast at all, jump in our cars, drive an hour and a half to go to work, spend 8 hours doing a job, perhaps which we don't like, which has no positive impact on society, then 1.5 hours back in the car, then quickly go to the supermarket and that every day? Is this the life we want? And I think Corona makes us aware that, or gives us time now to reflect, what kind of life do we really want? And then the third part, before we go to Q&A, is that for me, COVID or Corona is the first wave. And it's a small wave. I think the second bigger wave, which is gonna hit us, is the recession following Corona. Of course, now there's a lot of support of governments, but when that stops, a lot of people will lose jobs. Then the climate change. If we go up with more than 2 degrees Celsius, permafrost will start to melt, methane gas will be released. We will increase the temperature of our planet a lot, and it has huge impact on droughts, on storms, on water levels rising. So we will have a lot of migration and so on. And then for me, the biggest one is probably biodiversity collapse. Because of the climate change, we are really impacting our lifestyle a lot. So we need to do something really and urgently. So what do we need to do? What we need to do is we need to put the economy no longer as the goal, but in the center, and organizing in such a way that our society is benefiting of it. Not only the people in the south, but the people in the south and the people in the north, but with different accents, different aspects of their lives. And of course, we should be and respect the environment. When I've shown my kids the savannah, wildlife, underwater and also on land. I want my grandkids also to be able to see it, and not only in a virtual environment like in Singapore. They created a building in Singapore where they simulate jungle and external life. You can walk through it. It's magnificent. It's a glass box. It's like, in case it goes completely, disappears completely, we still have that artificial environment where we can still live. But I don't want that artificial environment. I want to have the real thing for my grandkids still available. So how to get there? I think we need to change a few things. We need to change from GDP measuring well-being. We need to change from unlimited material growth to personal growth, personal enrichment, fulfillment, from profit maximization to jobs that add value to society. That it can be on an environmental, better water, or perhaps more free time. Instead of jobs, meaningful activities. Even the economists in the 30s, they said, if we advance, we should be able to work only 20 hours a week. The other 20 hours we will spend on voluntary work, being with our friends, being with our family, taking care of our grandparents. That's a goal. I don't like the idea of people saying we need to work 60 hours a week. We need to work till we're 70 years old. If you want to, that's something else. But no, we have artificial intelligence coming. We have robots coming. We're going to have less jobs. So we need to organize ourselves differently. It should be perfectly okay to have only 20 hours of paid work, and then the other 20 hours a week or more doing stuff that actually, maybe arts, going to museums, listening to theater plays. I think we need a society that can do that. So now we think about scarcity, we should move toward thinking about abundance. For me, and a very interesting concept is Ikigai. I don't know, have you heard about Ikigai? Who knows the concept of Ikigai? Do we have Japanese with us? Abigail, you're right. There are very dangerous diseases captured in permafrost. So yeah, much worse than Corona, by the way. So do you know the concept Ikigai? Did you see that somewhere? Of course, automation will create new jobs. Yeah, for sure. And technology and so on. Yeah. So it's not that robots and artificial intelligence will take away. But I think there's a lot of jobs that perhaps are a bit stupid, don't really add a lot of value that we could use to replace by reason for being. Yeah. So if you want, I had a TED talk where I link Ikigai with new economic systems. I think Bert van Thilborgh will share the link with you where I explain it. It's used in marketing. Yeah. So for me, I was looking, how can I help young people to find their purpose in life? And I know quite a lot of young people who do, but they struggle with the fact that they're quite often not paid for what they do. They don't get an income. So they have very good ideas. They're very creative. They're entrepreneurs. But at the moment, there seems to be no market for it. And why is that? Because the way we remunerate things is not always correct. We remunerate jobs like in the financial world for making more money by milliseconds trading quicker, but we're paying very little, for example, our people in the hospitals. And I think the people in hospitals, for example, are doing a tremendous job, and they're actually not so well paid. Garbage cleaners are not very well paid, but I was in Kathmandu a couple of years ago, and there was a strike, and there was garbage all over the place. I mean, you start to realize the value of somebody taking away your garbage, and then wondering, maybe we should pay them better because they are valuable. So maybe we should find a way where we can finance people doing things that add value, that makes lives better, more than we do today. The fact of waking up every day with the same attitude, it's about purpose driven. So, and I'm almost at the end of the slide. So the narrative that I want to promote, and what I do now in this very short session, it's too short, I want to talk about a lot more, is we need to redesign our economy in such a way that people can live their passion with financial security, and in such a way that our society and the planet can thrive. So for me, instead of sustainability, I prefer the word thrivability. We should move towards a thriving society where people can develop themselves and have a good life, buen vivir, Spanish concept, buen vivir, and actually also doing good for others or for the planet. And in order to get there, but that's a separate lecture, I think we need to change our money system. Our money system makes us forcing our economy to grow, because money is created actually out of nothing, but it's debt. And if a bank creates money, it gives you 100,000 euro, you need to pay it back with interest. But of course, where's the interest coming from? It was not created in the first place. So you have to grow economically in order to be able to have more, so you can pay back the interest to the bank that originally lended you the money. So we need to change something with that interest, which is charged on money when you loan it. And that's the second point. the negative interest. For example, I don't know if you know the Triodos Bank. It's one of the more sustainable banks in Belgium. If you have more than 500,000 euro on your bank account, you pay to them. You pay, I think, 1.5%. And other banks are going to follow. So the banks versus the European bank have the same. So it's negative. So if you're going to put money in your bank, you're going to have to pay them for it. Yeah, but it's good because there is no longer an incentive to accumulate money. At the moment, the more money you get, the better. But in that system, the more money you get, there's going to be a limit. Maybe you're going to be allowed to have 1 million, or like Triodos, you're allowed to have 500,000 euro in your bank account. If you have more, you're going to start paying. And the money you pay to the bank is used for good projects, for common good projects. And you can have your citizens having a debate about it in your country and say, okay, what are the projects we think valuable? Okay, how much money do we need for that? Okay, if we're going to introduce negative interest, so if people accumulate more than 500,000 euro, they will have to pay to the bank, and that money is going to be used for financing projects. And I combine it with the first, now I'm using the second and the third, demurrage, it's called demurrage, negative interest. And it's happening between the European Central Bank and the local banks. It's happening now, for example, with Triodos Bank, and I think other banks are going to follow. And the first one is universal guaranteed income or universal basic income. UBI is the term which is used the most, but I use universal guaranteed income. I think we need to move to a system where everyone gets a fixed amount of money per month, 1,000 euro, for example. No more unemployment benefits, no more checking if that's correct or if they are not working in black somewhere else, and so enjoying the benefits and at the same time doing something else. No, you replace it all by universal guaranteed income. Quite a lot of tests have happened in Switzerland and Finland, not always till the very end, so it makes it quite difficult sometimes to evaluate. But it's proven that people that get money still keep on doing stuff. Like in Corona, if suddenly you have no more job, after a few months, you're going to say, I want to do something useful. So imagine you get 1,000 euro a month. You may start something that you really enjoy doing. Maybe that doesn't bring you a lot of money immediately or no money at all, but you have a guaranteed income. You have enough to pay yourself food and housing and energy. And you're going to start perhaps making nice pottery, or you're going to maybe create a theater play for people, for your friends, and they come over and they enjoy it. So it's proven that people keep on working. Not all, you always have people, but no matter what system, you will have lazy people doing nothing, or alcoholics or whatever. But offering a guaranteed income takes away the anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety of people now. People are afraid losing their jobs, so they keep on doing stupid jobs. There's a very good book called Bullshit Jobs by Graeber. A lot of people are doing bullshit jobs, but they do it because they need the money. So if you have enough money, you stop doing bullshit jobs and you start doing things that really matter to you. You can find your ikigai, and that's the point I wanted to make. I think a lot of people know what their purpose in life is, but don't have the means to do it, and are doing stupid jobs, working in factories day and night, or whatever, because they need to pay the education of their kids, for example. No, the education of their kids should be for free. And that money can come from SUMSI, which is a sustainable money model. So, okay, it's too short, but I want to give you the spirit of what I believe. We're working on a book, so let's talk. So if you want to read more about the role of money in the economy, Sacred Economics of Charles Eisenstein is really a very interesting book. David Corton, Change the Story, Change the Future, A Living Economy for a Living Earth. So if you like reading, these are two good books. The Age of Thrivability of Michelle Holliday, and this book, the one on the right, I will have a small article in it. It will be published also in English the first quarter of 2021, and you have the grondbeginselen, the foundations for a new economy. And you have, I think there will be 30 different authors writing pieces in it. So if you're interested in this kind of new economy, you want to be part of it, you want to perhaps support it, I think this is going to be a very good or interesting book to read. To conclude, I signed declaration. That's a Belgian declaration. So there are all over the world people coming together and saying we need to do things differently. I want to read one sentence from the declaration. and I have 2 more slides to go. The economy is again being put in the service of the human being and nature with an accountancy that anchors the protection of human being and nature. So it should be serving. It should be not the goal, but serving society. And then some of you may have seen it. Alive on Our Planet, you need to have Netflix for it at the moment. So David Attenborough, who was the speaker in a lot of nature documentaries, he's now 90-something, and it's kind of his legacy to the world. It's a very nice, well-made documentary. Did some of you already see it? Yeah, so of course it still has a bit of the old narrative in it, because he's pleading for technology as the way to keep on growing economically, but that's a side note. I think it's really worth to watch, and yeah, you probably watch a lot of series, so include that one as a kind of something else that you can see. Actually, the Q&A is missing, so I'm going to show that afterwards. So I think that it's important that each of you, no matter how small you are or how important you're going to be, you can have an impact on that change. I would like all of you thinking about how can you live a good life, respecting the lives of others? How can you live a good life, respecting also the possibility of your kids and grandkids to have a good life? So maybe what can you do for yourself, but also for others? How can you contribute and add to having a better society, whether it's in business, whether it's in your other activities you do? So I think it's really possible. I share with you here my email address. You can link with me if you have a LinkedIn profile in LinkedIn. And I also invite you to have a look at the TED Talk, which I think can also be pretty inspiring. That's it for my talk to you. So I propose we close the sharing of the presentation. So I don't know if I can see you, or maybe, and then I would like to invite you to ask me difficult questions, to criticize stuff, and so on and so forth.
I will start with some questions that are already on the chat.
Okay.
Ram has Verhavert asked the questions. Wouldn't that make the purpose of working and improving to degrade over time? Wouldn't that make the purpose of working and improving to degrade over time? It's about universal basic income, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I think it depends where you need the incentive from. If you believe that people are only incentivized by making more money, in our current system, making more money is useful, but there is a limit. I mean, if you have 10 houses and 5 huge cars, you reach that limit. So I think the incentive, if you look at intrinsic motivation, so people enjoy doing stuff they're interested in and they would like to develop. So I think a universal basic income will still leave that as a possibility and actually encourage it. It takes away anxiety. People are now afraid of losing their job because, and even if it's used, I mean, they don't like their job, but they can't do anything else. They're limited because they need that monthly income. If they have a monthly income, they can start doing a lot more what they enjoy doing and what they're good at, and they will start working on their talent and develop. So I think it will be, at the country, more incentivizing people to do so. Yeah. Of course, there's always a percentage that does nothing, but in the old system, in the new system, yeah. So that would be my answer.
Yeah. Yes, is also. I think that Jens is also more in line with your answer, because he says, I think in this system more people will become an entrepreneur because they get money even if they fail.
Yeah. And I think so yeah, if I look at, I know a lot of people. My son is 25, my daughter is 21. So and they are entrepreneurs. They are social entrepreneurs, and they have a lot of friends that do that, and they are struggling. They have good ideas. They are this useful stuff they bring. But it's very difficult to, and they're afraid. So then some of them say, okay, let's just go and work for a bank or just work in the supermarket, and it's sad because it's talent which is not allowed to be used.
Do you think that our society is ready for your move and your ideas? Because I think, as you agree with, as you said with your children, that they struggle for for let's say, to develop their own career with sustainable goals and sustainable businesses. But isn't our society, don't we go further like we did before?
I know. I think we're at a moment where it's actually it's now that moment where it's possible if we give it a small push. And Corona actually helped in order for people to realize what really is needed. I will give my son as an example. He started a movie production house, and he only makes movies for companies that have sustainable programs behind it.
Okay.
So and it works. He works for NGOs, he works for companies, and slowly he's getting the attention, but he's very strict on himself.
Yeah.
He actually started initially also working for companies to make training videos, and they are well paid. And he said, no, that's not what I want. So he quit getting the well-paid jobs to do only stuff that really for him matters, making less money, but fortunately enough to live. Yeah. But I find it very courageous that you take that choice. But it's not normal that stupid money is well paid and stupid jobs are well paid, and for example for even movie making, and then movies that have an impact, that promoting sustainable stuff is actually badly paid. So that's not correct.
Yeah.
So who's going to pay for a system where everybody gets money without working? Well, then you have to go to the money section that I have in my presentation. You can go to SUMSI, the way money is being created. You can. So our system is tested. There is software behind it. It's actually made by Stef Kuipers, who is an IT engineer. So and we're talking with the Central Bank of England. We're talking with the European Bank. So you can. I mean, money is. There used to be a link between money and the gold standard, for example. There is no link anymore. Money is just a question of trust. Mm-hmm. If we decide to create money which we use for the purposes, and we trust it's there and it has purpose, it will work. There is enough money available. There are trillions and billions of money available. Not perhaps now we have 1% who has the top one. What is it? The top 100 richest people have more than 6.6 billion people on this planet. So I think it's about inequality in the way it's being distributed. So yes, it is possible. I'm really convinced we can start such a system. And not only convinced, it's also proven.
Yeah. Okay. Are there still some other questions for Eddie from the students? Nadia tells sustainability can be reached through a Buddhist economy, which consists of reducing consumption instead of increasing it.
I think one of the critical factors indeed are consumption. We're so focused on consuming by marketing campaigns. Yeah. If you see, we're all triggered every day by millions of, Black Friday as an example.
Yeah. And Cyber Monday.
Yeah, and today, so and what if we go back to, let's say, a mobile phone, which like a fair phone? So that's a fair phone where you can just change the software or parts of it. Or the iPhone, for example, you need to buy a new one completely. So we can make our products differently. But now Apple is not doing it because they're being evaluated on their stock market performance. They need to sell more. They have to have more profit. So they are forced to work in that old system. What if that system does no longer exist because there is no incentive anymore? I don't know. Jens said that could be a great point. So it would take me too deep perhaps to go into that system. But if there is no financial incentive of companies anymore to grow and to have more profit, I was working for do you still hear me?
Yes, yes.
I was working for J&J, and we were making tons and tons of millions of dollars of profit. But at a certain moment, they decided to lay off people because they were afraid they were going to make less profit in the future. And then I was wondering, although I really enjoyed working for J&J, I mean, what's the purpose? I mean, we make a lot of profit, but we need to make more profit than our competitors so that our stocks goes up. And then we lay off people. And so we should not lay off people. I mean,
I understand.
I like Nadia's remark. It frustrates me knowing that we can be happy with so much less, but we keep producing, therefore running the. Yeah, it's true. I think we can have other values should become more important. you can still have, I think you can go to more sustainable products that last longer, which have a value, which are perhaps locally made. Maybe an uncle of you makes a bench or a table of wood which comes out of a garden nearby, or a tree that fall off, and you keep that for 10 or 15 years, so appreciating a lot more locally produced stuff, maybe by people where you have a link with, instead of now being disconnected. We're a lot disconnected. We're disconnected of the products we buy. We're disconnected of the people who made the products.
Yeah, an interesting remark from Pearl. He says, "I don't think you can expect other people to limit their consumption, except if you obligate them to limit their choice to consume, which means a decrease of freedom."
Aha, this is the neoliberal thing I've been brought up with. Freedom. Let me do whatever I want to do. It's indeed a bit decrease of freedom. I do not think so. Corporate entities made us prison. Yeah, I think if you believe you're free, there is Paul Verhagen, who is a Belgian philosopher. He says, in our modern society, we're not as free as you think we are. We're really pushed in a certain direction. We're pushed in buying stuff. We're pushed in getting a business degree. We're pushed in, and so that's about the freedom. Now, I do agree when he says that we need, or she says, I don't know, can't see it now. I do agree with the fact that what we give value, what we value in life, and maybe we can change what we value in our lives. Maybe we can value friendship. Maybe we can value products which are made artisanically, or artisan way, where you know the person who made it. So if that becomes more important than, look, I have the iPhone 12 now, and that gives me status, it's linked to status. If we can replace status, which we now get through the products we have, the car we drive with, the phone we have, if we can replace it by being recognized by people that really matter to you, so that in your friends community, the people you really love, if they like you for who you are, for what you do, I think that should replace status as being, look, I have my iPhone 12, I drive a Tesla. I think if you can, but we need marketing for that. We need people, we need organizations also perhaps promoting again true values and saying that's what, for me, economy of well-being instead of GDP, and also consumers. Yeah, and then you still have the freedom. I will not take away your freedom. You can still choose whether you go for one or for another. I don't think you have to limit the choices. These are individual values that you can't expect from. Okay, do you know Rutger Bregman?
Yeah.
Rutger Bregman works for the Dutch magazine, The Correspondent. He wrote a book, Why Most People Actually Are Good. I think it's been translated. Maybe not, the title is not like that in English. Read that book. I think we have much more in common than you think. We're not selfish, egocentric persons. If you look at kids, young kids, 2, 3 years old, the majority is sharing, is helping others. So it's actually our education that changes us into selfish beings. Like, I want to have more than my neighbor. I want to. So if we change our education, for me, education is important. And if you go back to the core values of people, it is helping others. It is sharing. So if we could value these values more, and also in our educational system, promote them, then you get a mentality shift. It will take time. I think it will take at least a generation. But you see more and more people all over the world joining organizations, NGOs, saying we should do things differently, or getting out of the system, living. Yeah, the UBI of €1,000. This is an example. You have to make a different one for each country, because it depends on your living expenses. So in one country it will be 250, more than enough. In another one it will be 3,000. Yeah. So that's how you solve the inequality of the UBI.
Tattoo, do you think this change will happen through some sort of reset, or will it be a more gradual slide?
Okay, I wrote an article about it in LinkedIn. Because of Corona, I was always afraid that we had to go through a new war. I thought that the only thing apparently people seem to understand is when there is a third world war, and then people think, okay, we need to do what happened after the Second World War. United Nations was created. A lot of the human rights document was created. So, but I'm not a big fan of having first the Third World War before we change things. So for me, this 2008 financial crisis was a first warning. Our current system is reaching its limits. It's not. There was a light financial crisis. We're going to have a much worse coming up, for sure. So Corona is another one. It's like the earth or nature telling us, be careful what you're doing. You're mixing people and animals very closely because you're taking away the habitat of animals. If climate change increases, indeed, permafrost, more viruses. So these are warning signs we get. Hopefully enough people start to see these warning signs and start, like I'm doing with you now, warning people like, guys, think it over. Is this really happiness? Are we happy that your both parents have to work 5 days, 6 days a week, or having a nervous breakdown, anxiety, burnout, depression? For what? What's the purpose? Why are we on this planet? Are we here to work that much? Can't we organize our society differently, that people can have a more relaxed life and a good life? So I hope we don't need that third world war. I think Corona and other signs are there. So that's my answer.
Maybe two last questions. The questions are coming in. Will there be a stock market in the new system or not? A question of Jens.
That's a very financial question. I think the stock market was created because companies want to expand and needed money. So we need to find a system. So yes, there will be a system where companies that are investing and need extra money will be able to get it. So yes, there will. I would like to go to Sophie. So more details in SUMSI. If you Google SUMSI, Sustainable Monetary System, you find a whole explanation page in English and in Dutch about how it works. I would like to perhaps, if you allow me, with Sophie's question is really a good one. What advice do you have for us young professionals? Personally, I struggle to find a balance between profit-making business practices and business that contributes to society environment positively. Should we start focusing on governmental practices instead of the business? No. I think you can stay and stick in business. But I would like you to try to move already as much as you can towards sustainability practices, like my son is doing with his video production house, for example. And maybe in the beginning, you can still accept a few more commercial jobs because you need the money to continue working, or not survive. I hope with a non-commercial activity or less commercial activities, you can make enough. And then when I work with companies, with people in companies, they tell me they start working 4 days out of 5. And the 5th day, they do what they really like. Then they work 3 days a week, and then they do 2 days which they really like, which is perhaps music or art. And maybe they can make already a small living out of what they do in their private time. And after a while, they can make enough to say, bye-bye, I don't want to work for that large company anymore. I will make a lot less, but I will spend 3 days a week for myself doing stuff that actually brings in enough money. So a gradual evolution, because I know you need to survive, but yeah. And of course, companies, they are not all bad. I know a lot of companies that actually start to think more from okay, what's the purpose of our company? How can we engage people that they can do what they really enjoy and they're good at in our company, doing useful work with added value. So also in the more profit world, there are a lot of organizations that really start to include this sustainability approach also within their company. As long as they're on the stock market, it's difficult. When I talk to the executives of these companies, they say, yeah, but every 3 months in the US, we have to publish our figures. Those companies who are more in private hands, whether they are Torfs, schoenen company, shoe company, so they have long-term vision. They're not being evaluated by investors. So quite often these companies can move faster into sustainable way of operating. So I would recommend you to look and really choose wisely for what kind of organization you're going to work. Or if you work for yourself, maybe combine it if you can't make enough living out of what you do. But search first what's your core value and try to live up to it. You will be much more happy and much more stable. Will have less chances of burnouts or depressions. So it's really worth it.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. I think it was a very, very interesting, an interesting lecture. Also some interesting questions from the students, and you gave a fantastic answer, and I think you have inspired them also by giving your personal journey, which was very interesting to hear. So I think a warm applause. Normally it's a real applause in a classroom. It's now a virtual applause, but I see some nice and interesting and very positive comments already coming up and popping up in the presentation chat. So I would like to thank you again, and hopefully we can collaborate in the future. And if you need a guest lecturer at the Karel de Grote Hogeschool, please give me a short note or.
I will. And so thank you for inviting me here. And for all students, if you like learning more about it, connect with me on LinkedIn. Have a listen also to the TED Talk. And of course, most importantly, live a good life.
Yes.
Not only for yourself, but for the people that surround you, and also think about future generations. Okay. So thank you for your attention.